What's up everyone? Glad you're back. Today I want to talk about how to pitch a pyramid shelter. So the first question you might have is, why do I even need a pyramid shelter? And the honest answer is, you probably don't need one. If you already have a tent or you already have a tarp, you're probably good for most conditions and you don't necessarily need to add anything else to your gear closet. The only people that really need pyramid shelters or another shelter that's more robust than a normal 3-season tent or tarp is if you're going to be spending, extended periods of time in alpine conditions with really excessive nasty weather. Where the pyramid shelter comes in handy for me personally and where it is in my gear closet is really when I'm camping above tree line when it's excessively windy or otherwise, poor weather. That said, even though you could totally get by with a tarp in most conditions, sometimes the pyramid shelter is still the best tool for the job if you have one. And really that's going to be any time that you want four-sided protection, you want something that's more stable in high winds than a tarp. So if you're worried about your stakes coming out or something like that, a pyramid shelter is going to be able to deflect the wind way better. And finally, it's also way more versatile. With a pyramid shelter, you also have an optional internet that you can normally buy for them. Sometimes there's solid internets for the winter, with solid sides, and then they have mesh on top, or they have full internets, which are really just for bugs with a bathtub floor. But when you combine that with the actual pyramid itself, you have what's essentially a tent. But you can also take out the internet when you don't need it and you just have the shape tarped. So really, if you were to pick one shelter that you could use in all conditions, well, mostly all conditions, it would be a pyramid shelter. So if you're looking for your first shelter, it's really not a bad place to start. One thing that I do want to make sure I'm noting here, though, is just because I'm saying that you don't necessarily need a pyramid shelter or another kind of tent for that matter, and you can get by with a tarp in most conditions, doesn't mean that I advocate camping at the top of a mountain in strong winds, excessive rain, using a tarp. Some people could make it work, but make good decisions. Make sure that you know how to use your gear when you're going out so that you stay safe. In terms of gear that you're gonna need, it's pretty straightforward. First off, you're gonna need stakes. Similar to the tarp video that I most recently did, I'll link it up here. I recommend Y stakes. They're just the strongest and most stable, so it's really the best, especially if you're just getting used to working with a pyramid shelter. So these are what I recommend. I use MSR groundhogs, not groundhog minis. I do the full size 7-inch, I believe, groundhogs, and they work incredibly well. So for most mids, or all really as far as I know, you're gonna need 4 stakes minimum. Most cases, you're gonna be using 8, which is going to be all 4 corners plus 4 panel tie-outs, and really it's just upwards from there depending on how many tie-outs you want to use. Most mids have tie-outs kind of going up the sidewalls and stuff like that to help deflect wind and also to give a little bit more living space on the inside. So really it's upwards from there depending on how many you want. I believe that with the Duomid, there's like 18 or 21 tie-outs or something like that. So it's pretty significant. So yeah, as many as you need. For when you're not staking down a load-bearing tie-out, so one of the ones that really is responsible for keeping the shelter standing, you could use titanium shepherd hooks or something like that just to keep things a little bit easier. Up next, you're gonna need a center pole. And this could really be anything. It could be a trekking pole. You could order one like I did. This is an adjustable trekking pole from Locura, I believe is the way it's pronounced. But I got one specifically made for the Duomid. That's adjustable. It just makes it a little bit easier when I'm setting up in case I'm not on level ground, or if I want to pitch it higher or lower. I just like having something that's adjustable. And then finally, you're gonna need your pyramid. So I have an MLD, Mountain Laurel Designs Duomid. I have had this for years and it's great. It's actually one of the first real pieces of ultralight backpacking gear that I purchased. I saved up for a really long time to get it, so it's a little bit sentimental for me. But yeah, so I use a Duomid. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna lay out our mid on the ground. We're gonna try and make it as square as we can, and then we're gonna stake out the back 2 corners, and we're gonna do it medium tight. By that we mean that it's tight enough that it keeps a straight edge, but not so much that you can't move it with your finger. Now that we've got the back edge staked down, we're gonna grab one of the front corners, and we're gonna stake that down as well. And we're gonna try and make sure that we're keeping the whole shelter square as we're doing so. So 90-degree angles on the corners, and we wanna make sure that the lines are coming out at 45-degree angles. Now, I should note that when you originally stake down the original back corners, or the first 2 back corners that you staked, it's totally fine if those go straight out from the sides of the shelter and don't come out at 45-degree angles. As you start to tension everything up, they will adjust themselves to be closer to 45 degrees. And we're gonna go around and we're gonna move the stakes in a moment anyway, just to make sure that everything looks good. Now that we've staked down the 3rd corner and we've made sure to make the shelter as square as we possibly can, we can go and we can stake down the final corner, which is really going to kind of finalize the shape or the footprint, so to speak. At this point, our shelter is fully staked down, so all 4 corners are done and everything should be medium tight. Now we want to go around and adjust all the stakes to make sure that they're on a 45-degree angle coming out of the corners, just to make sure that we get nice even tension once we finally pitch it. You can also use this as an opportunity to make sure that the footprint of the tent is square at this point, so if you need to do any adjusting, now is definitely the time to do it. Now for the fun part, let's insert our center pole and see how it looks. All right, at this point, things are looking pretty good. We're pretty square. We've got a pretty good even tension along the shelter. Now we're gonna go around and we're gonna tension the 4 corners that we staked down. Now that our 4 corners are staked down nice and tight, we can go around and we can stake out our mid-panel tie-outs. Now here you don't need to go too tight. You just wanna make just enough tension to take some of the ripples out of the surface. Also, with the Duomid in particular, it's got a slight catenary cut to it, and there's a little bit of a lip or a brow in the front. So you can actually pull out the stakes just a little bit to let a bit more airflow in, which is what I'll do here. And at this point, we have a nice, cozy pyramid shelter, all set for rain, sleet, snow, high wind, pretty much anything that nature can throw at it, for the most part. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.